I want to talk about free speech, particularly as it applies to the discussion of some issues that have recently been on YouTube. There is a very basic distinction about free speech that some very sophisticated thinkers on YouTube remarkably conflate. There is the distinction between the right of free speech and the content of free speech. Let's discuss the right of free speech first. When we discuss the right of free speech, we need to distinguish between the range of free speech people should have and the range of free speech they actually enjoy. How much free speech should people enjoy? People and nations differ on this matter, even in the so-called first world democracies. For example, in some nations it's illegal to question the Holocaust, while in other nations it's not illegal to question the Holocaust, even though it's generally and correctly recognized as idiotic to do so. Now, I tend to be very libertarian about civil liberties, so much so that I think that it should be perfectly okay to appropriate the images, words, and videos of others without their permission, although I think that attribution of what is appropriated should be required on moral grounds. I think this because the language, conceptual forms, and media people employ to create their images, words, and video are actually culturally dependent and, as such, are themselves appropriated from the common stock of a given culture. Now, that might be one measure of how much free speech people should enjoy, but it has nothing to do with how much free speech people actually enjoy. As a matter of law and custom, the images, words, and video people create are protected by copyright. That is the state of affairs as it exists in large swaths of the world today. Yet remarkably, some people on YouTube become outraged when they commit copyright violations and Google enforces their copyright obligations. These complainers suffer from an elementary confusion. They are protesting the range of free speech they actually enjoy on the basis of the range of free speech they should enjoy. Yet what do they expect Google to do? Ignore copyright laws? It's ridiculous to expect Google to change a practice that can only be changed on a fundamentally more radical political level, a change that would require a radical redefinition of the private enterprise system, if not its complete elimination. My general advice for YouTube users is don't appropriate video, images, and audio without permission, and don't expect Google to allow you to violate the law and subject themselves to possible lawsuits as a consequence. There's another aspect about the right of speech, free speech, that I want to discuss, namely, who has it. This also is an elementary matter, and the only remarkable thing about it is, given its tripping obviousness, people should have to be reminded of it. Here's the scoop. If you believe in the right to free speech, then you believe that people should have the right to depict Mohammed any way they wish, and you also believe in the right of Muslims to protest depictions of Mohammed, and even to argue that no one should have the right to depict Mohammed at all. In other words, if you believe in the right of free speech, then you believe in the right of people to argue that your rights to free speech should be limited. Now, they should not be successful in that argument, but their right to argue that the right of free speech should be limited should not itself be limited. That's what it means to truly believe in free speech. Finally, I want to talk about the content of free speech. Some people seem to think that if they merely establish a right to free speech, then what they say is somehow immune from any possible criticism. This is to confuse the content of free speech with the right to free speech. Consider the upcoming annual depiction of Mohammed Day promulgated by some on YouTube. That people should have the right to depict Mohammed and make an annual event of it is beyond reproach examined on the level of a right. But as a matter of content, it seems juvenile, macho, provocative merely for the sake of being provocative, and hate-baiting. In my view, as a matter of content, it is so disreputable that no rational person can take it seriously. That some people defend the content of the event merely on the right to engage in it shows how they confuse the content and right of free speech. It also shows how indefensible the content of their speech is. If they can only marshal their right to engage in this speech as a defense for engaging in it, then that clearly shows that they cannot defend their speech on the basis of its content. And that is awfully pathetic. Well, I hope you found these distinctions helpful. Thanks.